What's up, guys? Dr. Shepard here. Today we are going to talk about 5 quick and pretty easy ways to calm somebody down if they're upset or anxious or angry or whatever. Okay, so we've all had the experience where someone has told us to just calm down or that we have nothing to be upset about. And if you're anything like me, that makes it at least a billion times worse. So let's talk about some things that will, at the very least, not aggravate the situation, but hopefully will also do what we call de-escalate the other person. In other words, kind of take them down from 60 back closer to 0. All right, so step number 1 is to just hold space for the person. I know that sounds like therapeutic gobbledygook. Well, I guess because it kind of is. So essentially the idea is that you are there for them, you are emotionally connected with them, you're listening to them in a non-judgmental and a kind way. Now, I know this seems super obvious, but this is probably the most important point of the entire video. Whenever somebody is struggling or really upset or anxious or angry, our first instinct is usually to jump in with suggestions or an attempt to relate to what they're going through. And those things are nice. I know they're coming from a good place, but in reality, they can just escalate the situation because the person doesn't feel heard and understood. So I want you to listen and really listen to the other person, to the extent that it might feel kind of weird because we're just not used to truly listening to other people in that way. We're always like formulating our next response or thinking about how we're going to jump in and solve the problem, but don't resist that urge and sit with the person, hold that space for their emotions, and really listen to them. Just being heard and understood can really calm someone's nervous system down. It makes you feel safe, it makes you feel connected, it makes you feel secure, and honestly, that might be all they need. But if not, let's talk about the second strategy for calming someone down. This is also pretty simple and straightforward. Just ask them how you can be helpful. Like I mentioned, our instinct in these situations is usually going to be to jump in and try to solve the problem, but that might not be what the person needs right then. And again, doing so can make them feel as though they're not being heard. So it can be really beneficial if you can reflect what you're hearing from them to show them that you're listening and then ask them how you can be helpful. So for example, if your friend is really anxious, pointing that out. Hey, I can tell you're really stressed right now. What can I do to be most helpful to you? Sometimes people have a really good idea of what they need help with, and it may not always be what you expect. Of course, there are going to be other times where they don't know, where they're so upset that they can't figure out what they want. And that's okay. Just the fact that you ask them how you could be helpful instead of assuming and trying to jump in and solve the problem, that can really go a long way in showing that you care. Okay, third strategy for calming someone down is to model physical calm. So you, even if you're feeling super stressed on the inside, you want to portray an air of calmness and serenity and I don't know, just imagine like birds chirping in the background, nice, calm things. Because if you start to escalate your body language, if you start to escalate your speech, if you start to get louder along with them, they're going to match that and exceed that. So basically you end up just ramping each other up until you get to, I don't know, bad places. So that's basically the opposite of what we're talking about. That's called escalating the situation. So again, even if you're not really feeling calm on the inside, I want you to imagine, okay, what would someone who is feeling calm look like in this situation? Usually that's going to involve sitting down rather than standing, having like a non-threatening posture. So kind of relaxed, having your arms down. You want to make gentle eye contact. So you don't want to avoid eye contact so they think you're not listening, but you also don't want to do the whole like stare down and intimidation tactic. That's not good. You also want to keep your voice soft and quiet and calm. No need to talk a lot. Remember, you're there to listen. And finally, believe it or not, it can be really helpful if you take some long, slow, deep breaths. First of all, it's going to calm you down, and that's usually not a bad thing. But second, when we're in a social situation, even those very subtle movements and behaviors are things that we tend to mirror with other people. So the other person, in seeing you breathing calmly and slowly, may start to mirror that, as opposed to when someone is getting anxious, angry, upset, their breathing starts to go faster, and that only serves to increase their anxiety and their anger. Okay, strategy number 4 is going to be offering a distraction. So if you want to keep somebody calm and you've asked them if there is something that you can do to help, they don't have maybe a specific idea in mind, and maybe they just don't want to talk about it anymore. You've let them say their piece, you've been listening. Maybe they'll find it helpful to have a distraction. And again, this is something you can ask them about, but if they do say that it might be helpful, so for example, if they are having a panic attack and they want help distracting themselves, you can help take them through some grounding techniques, or even just have them do something that is challenging, but of course not super frustrating or irritating, like working through a simple puzzle, or doing a task at work like filing something that isn't really stressful but does take up a little bit of mental energy, so they can shift their focus from their internal world into their external world. So as far as grounding techniques, I have a couple other videos that talk about some of these, but some classics are doing progressive muscle relaxation, so where you take each of your muscles and you squeeze them really tight for just a few moments before letting them go. You can do this going from the muscles in your feet all the way up to the top of your head. And this is something you could guide the other person through. Same thing with some breathing exercises. There's the classic 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique, where you look for 5 things you can see and you describe them in detail, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So if you give them that prompt and ask them to describe things, again, that's going to take them out of their internal world where they are really preoccupied and stressed and upset, and move them into the present moment, to their external world where, okay, things are okay. Okay, and last but not least, the 5th strategy for calming somebody down is to just give them some space. This is especially true if you ask them what they needed, what might help, and they said they want to be left alone or they don't want to talk about it. Take that really seriously. Sometimes people just need a minute, and if you're very overstimulated, very anxious, very upset about something, some people find it comforting to have another person there, but other people find it even more overwhelming, and it can make things worse. I find this to be a problem with parents sometimes. You don't want to leave your kid alone because you know that they're upset and you hate that they're upset and you want to be there for them, but it ends up just making things worse because they really need some time alone to process and take a minute. So if you can and the person is safe, then you really do want to give them some space and try your best not to take it personally. It probably has nothing to do with you. It's just a matter of where their head is at and what they need at the moment to help them feel better. So that's the quick guide on a couple of ways to calm someone else down. Of course, you always want to make sure that you and the other person are safe. So if you have any sense that it is a dangerous situation, that the person might hurt you or hurt someone else, always appropriate to call for help. Don't feel like you have to manage situations where someone is escalating like this. So someone is angry or super anxious or super upset. Don't feel like you have to manage all of that. It's not all on you. If you can, that's awesome, but you do have to remember to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you are getting too anxious and overwhelmed by the situation, then maybe it would be more helpful for you to take a step back, tag somebody else in, ask somebody else to be of help. If you've ever had an experience where you've calmed someone else down successfully, or where someone else has calmed you down successfully, I would love to hear about some of the strategies you've used, what has been helpful, what has maybe not been so helpful. Drop me a comment below, and if you like these sort of short videos with some quick tips for communication, for relationships, for handling difficult emotions, give it a like and a subscribe, and that'll let me know that this is the kind of thing you want me to talk more about. As always, thank you for hanging with me. I will see you guys next time.